But part of what made it the Magic City, Chuck, was if you wanted to come to Miami as a big, multi-millionaire baller and come in and live, the Club King life, so to speak, you could do that, right? But what was great about Miami is you could also just be a decent, hardworking man with a family and making less than $100,000, significantly less. You could still carve out a nice little life for yourself. What has happened in the last 5 to 10 years, but especially dramatically, Chuck, since the pandemic, and we can get into the whys later, but it has become one of the most expensive cities, not just in the United States, but in the world.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Latino Vote Podcast. Did you miss me? Mike Madrid's been running this thing solo while I've been on the other side of the world, and I hope he hadn't been embarrassing. Y'all, I've been trying to listen and watch what he's been doing. I've been following on Twitter. Seems like everything went along smoothly without me. If he was here, he would probably say he didn't miss me at all. But we all know Mike Madrid missed me. But I couldn't think of anybody better to step into Mike's shoes and to talk about some of the things that went on this week in political news is my good friend, poster extraordinaire, Fernand Amandi. Fernand, thanks for being here.
Chuck, what a pleasure to be here with you and on the Latino Vote Podcast. Good stuff.
Anything going on exciting in Miami?
Not really. It's been a quiet week, quiet year. Not a whole lot.
Before we get into Miami, for all of you wondering where I've been, I was over in the Indian Ocean with some buddies of mine on a conservation trip in an atoll. That's fancy for a small, tiny island between the Seychelles capital of Mahi and Madagascar. How about that, Armandi, for an old kid grew up in a trailer house in East Texas?
Boy, that sounds like a great way to spend year one of the Trump administration, somewhere in a Seychelles island.
Ooh, I thought about just staying over there. Andres will put up some great pictures of some amazing once-in-a-lifetime fish that I caught. There are these giant GTs. You may remember this, Fernand, and that is, do you remember the BBC special that showed these giant trevally fish that were hunting these birds and they would go through the water, jump out of the water to catch birds in mid-flight? That's where I was.
Oh, wow.
And these things are big and angry, and we caught them on a fly rod in the surf, and it may have been some of the best 4 or 5 days of my life, minus any family activity. I don't want my wife or my kids to get mad at me, but man, did I have a blast. But it's good to be back in the real world. While I was gone, there seems to have been a couple of elections, but what I really want to dig into is this mayor's race. For those who've lived under a rock in the last 72 hours, brother, can you tell me what was so historic about what happened in the Miami mayor's race just last week?
Well, a couple of things, Chuck. First and foremost, for the first time in its history, which is over 100 years old, the city of Miami elected a female mayor. So that in and of itself, made this a very dramatic and important race in that we broke the glass ceiling here in the city of Miami, which probably should have been broken many, many years before that. But that finally happened. And I think the thing that really got the most national attention, Chuck, was that for the first time in decades, it was a Democrat, somebody who ran openly on the ballot, even though the race was nonpartisan in its actual execution, but ran as a open, proud Democrat, was able to win the race and win it not only in convincing style, but having done so against really the full-throated national support of the MAGA movement behind it, all the way up from the president of the United States, Donald Trump, who was actively involved and actively endorsing repeatedly, all the way down through all of the leaders of the party, certainly those in Florida and other prominent Republican leaders around the state and the country who thought this was a race that they wanted to weigh in and hold. So that happened, and she didn't just win, she won by 19 points. So I think a lot of people are looking at that result and seeing it for what it is, which is, a shot in the arm for Democrats, certainly in South Florida. We had a really bad November of 2024 election. And the idea that maybe the state of Florida might be in play again for the future. And just in general, the trend that we've seen really over the last 9 to 10 months, where Democrats are doing very well in special elections, certainly around Florida and around the country, and really overperforming what we saw in November 2024.
For those of you who are listening who may not understand all the demographics and how big this is, I'm going to ask some simple questions. I don't expect for you to know the precise percentage, but I want to draw a picture. And the picture I want you to give me, Fernand, is what percentage do you think of the folks that live in Miami that could vote in this race are Latino, Hispanic?
Well, I mean, absolutely the lion's share. The Miami-Dade County, where the city of Miami is the largest city, is a predominantly majority Hispanic county, maybe one of the largest in the country that are majority Latino. But in the city of Miami as well, significant, over half of the electorate, the potential electorate pool, is Hispanic as well. So that's why I think so many folks are paying attention to this as a potential bellwether.
And correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't the Republican dude running, last name, wasn't it Gonzalez?
Indeed, it was. It was Emilio Gonzalez, who is a former city of Miami city manager, also former director of the airport, and at one point was the head of the old INS service under George W. Bush. So a very respectable, prominent leader and well-known quantity in the community.
This wasn't some crazy right-wing MAGA nutball, even though he may have gotten the endorsement of some of those folks. He was just a regular Miami Republican, would you say?
I would say that's exactly right. I mean, you might even call him one of the last of the old Reagan Republican types. Certainly not the bomb thrower. This new evolution of almost politician/troll that we've seen emerge over the last 10 years in Republican circles.
And the name of the Democratic woman was non-Latino, right?
It really was. Eileen Higgins, which is
Eileen Higgins does not sound like a stalwart of a Latino vernaculars.
And certainly not on the printed page. But I will say this, Eileen Higgins, even though she is, an American, certainly born in another part, she's not from South Florida originally, but she speaks fluent Spanish. She had been on the county commission for several years before, and she kind of created a persona about herself called La Gringa, because she's very engaged in the communities, again, spoke Spanish, and kind of, even though she optically and on the page presents as a white Anglo-American woman, very much integrated into the community in that regard.
Well, from wherever she's from, whatever, I think it's important for y'all to know that she pretty much won 60-40. That's what the election results were, against a guy named Gonzalez in a city that's over 65% Hispanic, that is trended right for the last few cycles. There's a picture here, and I'll get to the national implications and what I've been seeing in other places, even in a special state representative race that was held at the same time in Georgia. But I wanted to have Fernand on because I don't think people really understand what Miami's like. They think that this whole place is what Florida. Miami used to be a Democratic bastion. Miami-Dade County used to be one of the only blue areas. But since Donald Trump's come along, it's reversed. And maybe you could tell us, as a pollster and doing a lot of work there, of like, what's that movement look like? Explain to people how blue it was and then how red it had become. And then second part of that question is, why did this happen? It's easy to say people are mad about what Donald Trump is doing, but I want you to go a little deeper on that. So start with, how blue was it? Then it trends to go how red, and then why did this happen?
So first and foremost, we have to understand that, as you point out, Chuck, Miami is very much in the state of Florida, but it's really kind of at the bottom. It's always been what you would call an urban county, and it's been, to your point, for really for the last 30 years, it's been a blue county, a deep blue county at that. In terms of its performance in the presidential election years, I think dating back from like 1992 all the way to 2020, it was reliably a significantly blue county. In fact, in 2016, when it was Hillary Clinton running against Trump the first time, Hillary Clinton won Miami-Dade County by almost 30 points. It was just shy. It was around 29.
Whoa. You got to say that again. Hillary Clinton carried Miami-Dade by 30 points?
That's right. In
wow.
2016. Yeah, almost 30 points. And it gave her a huge vote kind of advantage until those northern counties came in, where that's kind of erased all of the voter advantage she had coming out of Dade County. But what had happened was, Chuck, in all honesty, I think after the 2018 gubernatorial election, the Democratic Party nationally said, you know what, just the juice is not worth the squeeze in Florida. It is an expensive state. It costs a lot of money. And we always end up coming just short there, despite the fact that it's an important state, certainly electorally, when the electoral college years. And in the off-year elections, we end up losing by 2 or 3 points, but you have to end up spending tens of millions of dollars, and that money might be better used in other states like Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, certainly New Mexico, Colorado, Virginia. And of course, that is where we have seen Democratic gains in recent cycles. So what happened was in the 2020 election for president, and this is one of kind of the open secrets, the Biden campaign basically said, we're not really going to play in Florida, and by that matter, Miami-Dade. So you started to see kind of a little bit of a retreat from the political activities, which was never really year-round, but it basically slowed to a complete dead stop. That was exacerbated again in 2022, which is the off-year election where our infamous governor, Ron DeSantis, he ran for re-election, and there was virtually zero investment there by the state party, the national party in any real substantive way in Florida. And DeSantis does what a Republican had not done in Florida in 20 years, which was carry the county. And he carried it by a lot, by double digits. So that was kind of the first indicator that something was going on. Fast forward, Chuck, 2 years later, this time the Biden and then what became the Harris campaign openly said, we are not playing in Florida. That was a very clear announcement. So the Trump campaign, meanwhile, Florida was now the home state. It was, if you will, the heartbeat of the MAGA movement. They put a lot of time, energy, and effort, not just into the state, but certainly Miami-Dade County. And then Trump does what a Republican candidate for president hadn't done in generations, and it was carry Miami-Dade County by 13 points in November of 2024. But
for those of you listening, if you did the quick math there, Hillary Clinton carries this county by almost 30 points, and then less than 10 years later, Donald Trump carries it by 13.
Yeah, it's almost a 43-point swing. I mean, a remarkable swing at that. Now, the one little parenthesis here, Chuck, and this is what I think a lot of folks are a little bit missing in this Miami mayor's result that you and so many folks are interested in. The city of Miami, which is, its own municipality within Miami-Dade County, has almost always performed as a blue city in the election years for president and even in the off years for Democrats. So even in that environment, Chuck, where in November 2024, Donald Trump wins Miami-Dade County by 13 points, Kamala Harris still wins the city of Miami. She doesn't win it by a lot, but she does win it by about 2 points. So at the high point of what you might call Trump's emergence and repopularity in November 2024, the Democrats still held on and won the city of Miami. So that was kind of the backdrop to then what we saw coming into this election a year later.
But I know it's not apples to apples because of turnout numbers. I know enough about politics to know that. But if you just look at the comparison of winning it by 2 points and then winning it by 19 points, that's quite a jump. A big difference in like the electorate looked, right?
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, that's where we really do see, and I think why this result is as interesting and is generating as much attention as we see, because that overperformance, which in this case is, plus 17 points better than we saw in the presidential, that tracks, Chuck, with what we've really seen in almost every special election in Florida since about early April, where now that Trump and the administration is kind of full-fledged into the second go-around, we've seen almost every election in Florida an overperformance of double digits by Democrats. It doesn't even matter if it's the deepest ruby red district. Democrats are overperforming by double digits. So you layer that, Chuck, onto the statewide phenomenon. If all of a sudden Democrats are averaging a plus 14, a plus 15 in overperformance now, and Trump only won the state by 13 points last time around, that's what I think is causing a lot of people to say, now, wait a minute, Florida just might be in play in 2026 and beyond if we reinvest and re-engage in the state.
Mike brought up some interesting numbers doing some quick armchair quarterbacking from just looking at numbers and precincts after the election. I was following Mike's Twitter as I was transitioning back to the U.S. and looking into some of these precincts that are almost 100% Latino, Hispanic. And then as we know, where those neighborhoods are, they're predominantly, almost exclusively Cuban-Americans. And the shift within those precincts, I like to say, of the people that voted. Again, not a presidential turnout. But there's no doubt in all the numbers that you look at that there's a number of Cubans. Now, all of you nerds listening and have been listening to me and Mike for years know that they're the bedrock of the Republican Party in Miami. They've always been. But, I like to remind people that Barack Obama carried the Cuban vote. It wasn't by much, and a lot of young Cubans came out and voted for Barack Obama. But since Donald Trump, that had all shifted back to where it was. But in this election, there had to be, and we don't know exactly yet, but in those precincts that are almost 100%, there was such a swing that some of those Cubans have started moving back to the Democratic Party, at least either because they were frustrated about what they're seeing, or they're just mad about what Donald Trump's doing on immigration or other things. Mike has said that when you start losing Cubans on immigration, there's a lot of shit going down. What's your reaction to that?
Look, I think that's right. I think we do have to wait and just pause for a second. I don't want to suggest that there's been a tidal wave shift from the Cuban vote to the Democrats just yet, especially because, again, it was a nonpartisan race on the ballot. What I found is sometimes it's a little tougher for some of my fellow Cuban-Americans, unfortunately, when they see the D next to the name of the contender to really pull that lever. But even gradual shifts, which no doubt happened, Chuck, that represents a real problem in the state for the Republicans because they're counting on that strong swing back with Hispanic voters, and not just Cubans, by the way. I'm talking about we've seen movement from Puerto Ricans to the Republicans, Central and South American voters as well, which are the other big groups that really dominate the Florida Hispanic electorate. If that movement has basically stopped and you're starting to see a slight recalibration back towards the Democrats, that's where you all of a sudden start to suspect and see, well, wait a minute, Florida then might not be the closed off red, ruby red, dark red MAGA state that we thought it was as recently as a year ago.
Tell me about Miami. Tell me what's changed in Miami in the last 10 years. I've been talking to friends. We do some work in Florida for several nonprofits, have a couple candidates. But in Miami particular, it seems like in the last 5, 10, 15 years, there's been this influx of money, foreign money, other infrastructure coming in, lots of powerful people moving there. I know a lot of that started in COVID, where I've heard that there's been like this squeezing of the working class to where it's become harder and harder for them to afford a home, to get a good job, because you have all this wealth there. So there's a real difference between these two communities. Do you think any of that, coupled with a lot of unpopular things that Donald Trump has done, is squeezing these people looking for somebody or something that would give them some relief?
I mean, you've described it just beautifully. Miami, which, by the way, we are known as the Magic City. That's kind of been the little nickname that the city has had for forever, really. Part of what made it the Magic City, Chuck, was if you wanted to come to Miami as a big, multi-millionaire baller and come in and live, the club king life, so to speak, you could do that, right? But what was great about Miami is you could also just be a decent, hardworking man with a family and making less than $100,000, significantly less. You could still carve out a nice little life for yourself. What has happened in the last 5 to 10 years, but especially dramatically, Chuck, since the pandemic, and we can get into the whys later, but it has become one of the most expensive cities, not just in the United States, but in the world. So the people, if you're not making, north of, I would say, $250,000 a year, it's now very difficult to Miami. We have the highest rents in the nation proportionate to income. We have the most expensive grocery prices, the most expensive restaurant prices, some of the most expensive insurance, home insurance, property insurance, driver's insurance, anywhere that you'll see in the 50 states. All of those factors are making it not just harder to live, but frankly, unaffordable. And here's the other problem. Guess who has been in total control of the state of Florida politically for the last 30 years? The Republican Party. So you can't blame Democrats for the affordability crisis that you're seeing really pronounced now in Florida and certainly Miami. And now the Republicans control all of the federal levers. They control the Congress. They control the executive branch. we say it shouldn't be nonpartisan, but we know they control the judicial branch too with the Supreme Court. So there is, I think, a reaction to the fact that not only is life getting more expensive, people literally can no longer afford to survive here. So that's definitely a factor that I think has opened up a second look-see for Democrats running for office.
Let's back up. You do a lot of work. We've done work together in states around the country. You know, you've done a lot of polling, not just with Latinos, but with Democrats as a whole. You are a Latino pollster. You don't just poll Latinos, just like Chuck Rocha. Don't just go talk to Mexicans with cowboy hats. I say that to say that I want you to put a picture on what you see in Miami this week compared to what we're seeing across the country and what you take from that. It's easy to say, oh my God, it's going to be a blue wave. And sure, Democrats will underperform historically because they're supposed to, because of just where we are with who has control of the Congress, just getting elected to being president of the party, no matter if it's Donald Trump or not. But watching what happened in Georgia the same night as this mayor's race, where you had a redistricted state reps race that went for Donald Trump plus 12 in 24. You have a Democrat win a seat that was plus 12. You know, it was about a 13 point, to your point, over indexing. It overperformed 13. Then you look at New Jersey, where there's an average of plus 15. And in Passaic with Latino voters, it's plus 24. You look at Virginia, it's plus 15. You looked at Tennessee 7, where there was a special election, and she overperforms by like 9 or 10. Trump had won that by 22, and she loses by 8 or 9. Like, it's the same double-digit thing you're talking about, right? And now, it used to be, oh, it's too soon to talk about this. Well, now it's going to be Christmas. Like, we're going to start having primaries in the spring, and then we got a general election in less than 10 months. What advice would you have for Democrats? Because we see all of these good numbers, and does Miami just pile on to say something's happening? What is your take nationally?
Okay, so I had a chance to work on the New Jersey and the Virginia races as well, looking at the Hispanic voter performance and the evolution there. So, I think a lot of people were concerned. Can we revert back to the numbers we had enjoyed, prior to Trump with Hispanic voters? And the answer, as the results show, and you just mentioned, Chuck, is a resounding yes. And the secret to that was laser beaming and focusing, not just on the affordability crisis, because that's become like the magic term now, because even Republicans know they can't afford to not talk about it, but offering proactive solutions on the affordability crisis, making sure that the voters understand who is to blame for exacerbating the affordability crisis. And we know a lot of this has to do with Trump's policies. These tariffs have been a disaster for that as well. And really nothing that they've done to help the working man, those that are middle class earners that are in the 99%. There's been a hell of a lot of stuff done for the 1% of the 1%, but not everybody else. And then the other part of that magic formula, Chuck, is do not get bogged down on all of the other issues. We Democrats sometimes suffer from, not only do we want to show voters we're right, we want to show we're right about every single issue under the sun. And that doesn't mean that we're not in some cases. But when you take your eye off the ball of where most people are hurting, and that's financially, and you want to talk about a host of other things, one of the messages it sends is they're not taking seriously what I'm most concerned about. And you saw that laser focus on affordability in Virginia with Abigail Spanberger's campaign. You saw it with Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey. You saw it with Eileen Higgins here, and also the element of corruption, speaking out against the dysfunctional culture of corruption, which was one of the other problems in Miami. That's where I think the Democrats really, until the data suggests the voters have changed or feel otherwise, that's the sweet spot where I think it's going to be really tough for the Democrats to lose if they stay on that path.
Tell the folks where they can find you, your website, your social medias for folks to follow you. If you want to get behind the scenes we talk about polling a lot here. Mike does for sure. Fernand is one of the best in the business. Give our followers where they can keep track of you at.
Well, I'm on, I still call it Twitter. I'm loath to call it the other term, but I'm still on Twitter. You can find me there at Amandi on air. Also Blue Sky, same call sign, so to speak. Our website is bendixonandamandi.com, and you can see me every now and again on MS Now, where I'm an analyst as well, and we're doing our thing. But Chuck, I also want to make sure to give you a tip of the hat, even though you got the the beautiful 10-gallon one that I'm not wearing. But the work that you and Mike are doing and have been doing over the years and over the decades to spotlight the importance of our community. Really, the ones that are the big disruptors in American politics are Hispanic and Latino voters everywhere. And as we continue to grow in numbers and strength and influence, that's only going to continue playing a role. So thank you for what you've done there and what you're doing just as a whole. One of the best consultants on the Democratic side of the aisle.
Thank you, brother. And thank everybody for tuning in this week. As I said, it was such an honor to be back here, to be with my friend Fernand and all my boys down in Florida. There was a bunch of boys you should know, Fernand, who came down from Islamorada, Captain Steve Freeman, Captain Justin Ray from down by Key West, bonded by water, put my trip together. A bunch of Florida boys went down there, and we went halfway across the world to try to catch these big GTs, talking about conservation, talking about the big sugar, talking about what it means to keep Florida Bay clean, what it means for Biscayne Bay, and what it means for Buzzards Point. All of these things I'm talking about, y'all, are issues in Florida that Florida politicians should be talking about, because another thing that cuts across party lines is water, the environment, keeping everybody safe and healthy, and having a livable wage. I want to thank my brother again for being here. Thank all my boys who helped me get back safe and sound. I can't wait to tell Mike Madrid how I got scared to death in the Dubai airport. I don't even think I'm saying it right. My nose is all sunburned for all of you who are watching on the YouTubes. Until next week, don't forget, if you're still lucky enough to have your mom and daddy, give them a call. But we'll be back next week with Mike Madrid. Thank y'all.